I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Milena Regos, founder of Unhustle. She's a rebel entrepreneur on a mission to inspire 100 million people to change the way they work, live, and play. Sort of the anti-burnout hustle culture. So I'm really excited, as I was saying before we started recording, I'm excited to see, have you convince me that the other side of this. But first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, would you go ahead and start by, sort of telling us a bit about yourself, your background, and kind of what got you to this point, and then we'll go into, dive into whatever topics seem where it takes us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm originally from Bulgaria, and I came to the States in pursuit of the American dream. Chased a marketing career, have an MBA in international marketing in San Diego, which strangely led me to Lake Tahoe because I'm a skier as a kid. And so I ended up in the mountains. Spent 25 years in Lake Tahoe with a different variety of different marketing jobs, primarily in digital marketing. I became an early adopter of online marketing in 96, 97, when people still didn't know what Google is and Facebook didn't exist, leave alone TikTok. I worked for a media company in these early days, then was a marketing director for a ski resort for 10 years. And then when social media really took off, I said, okay, well, I want to start my own agency. I have that entrepreneurial spirit in me. And so I started my own digital marketing agency, which was doing great. And I was doing what I love. And I realized also that thanks to technology and social media, I was spending more and more time online in front of some kind of screen, which eventually I noticed that it started to frazzle my attention, started to disrupt my sleep. I started to, be constantly working, putting in 18-hour days, following Gary Vee to the teeth. So constantly producing content and all of it, just like hustle is the most important word ever, says Gary Vee. Well, I know what it did to me. I know what it did to my health, my mental health, my relationships, and all these sacrifices that I was putting forward in order to pursue some version of success, which in my eyes, coming from a scarcity background, was realistically speaking, a lot of abundance in the way of material wealth, right? So seeing what it's doing to me and not having taken a vacation in 3 years, but still being the entrepreneur determined to make it successful. And I ended up working with some celebrities like Madonna and Steve Nash and the Ritz. And on the outside, everything was great. On the inside, I was pretty empty and miserable and burnout. So we came to this place here that changed my life. We came for a 10-day digital detox trip, and I changed my life around and went in the absolute opposite direction, because I realized that hustle is the worst possible advice that can be given to entrepreneurs or to people in general. And now with the pandemic, it's kind of interesting to see how millions of people are waking up to this opportunity and reawakening of changing their relationship with work and pursuing more of what they value and more of a purposeful and meaningful life. So it's been interesting to see it in action.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly the pandemic has changed the way that everybody sort of approaches work, whether that's just a work from home experience, or even with so many people that have left jobs, whether it was voluntarily or sort of a forced exit because of layoffs, and haven't gone back. So I think that's kind of a huge shift in the workforce. Maybe I'm a big fan of Gary Vee too. I know, and I sort of am a fan of hustle to an extent, and I know that it can be also detrimental. So maybe start by just telling us how you define that. What does that look like to you? and then we can kind of go, okay, how do we go anti?
Yeah, I'm not in love with the word hustle in general. And if you look at the history of where it comes from, you would understand why. But hard work, the fact that you need to work to achieve something in life is like a duh moment, right? I mean, obviously you need to do that. And I'm a firm believer that hard work is very beneficial to living a meaningful and rich life. And so I'm not against the notion of working. I'm against the notion of hustle culture. And by that, I mean defining that you have to push yourself to the max at every single minute and exerting yourself to the max in order to pursue some kind of definition of success, which in reality, we know that it's not actually the end goal in all of this. So there's a point of redefining success in all of this, and then there's a point of how you go about it. And then when I started going down the research of, well, wait a minute, is this really true? Like you said, I want to see if I can convince you. Is it really true that when you're not working, you are not just relaxing and resting, but also is it beneficial to your brain, to your creativity, to your productivity? And there's so many studies and research pointing in the direction that well-being and flow and creativity and insights and aha moments, all these things that we as entrepreneurs need to thrive long-term, to create that sustainable, relaxed success, are in these moments, not necessarily when you're staring at a screen, but also we need the right amount of time away from the screen, whether you're exercising, meditating, just doing nothing, right? So we've gone away from that notion, that cult of productivity, because we feel guilty if we're not productive, whether it's based on societal norms or what we've been telling ourselves, or coming from the industrial age, or coming from, capitalism, or whatever you want to call it. We're in this mindset that that's what we have to do, right? And taking a step back, kind of slowing down to speed up is what I'm trying to inspire people to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I mean, I say you have to convince me otherwise, but I think more it's just, I want to kind of define and maybe sort of give tips and tools for reaching that space, right? Because 100% agree, you can't just work nonstop every day for like that's not eventually anti-productive, right? Eventually you're just too tired, right, or too burnt out to really be your best self. And so with that in mind, what kind of tools, tips, tricks, whatever it is, what do you sort of suggest people do to come out of that hustle culture, to come out of that, sort of workaholic mode, and maybe I don't know if you're talking about work-life balance, although sometimes people say that that's a mislabel. But what are your thoughts on how to combat that mentality?
Yeah. So I am reframing the language around work-life balance, and I'm calling it life, work, play design. Because I'm realizing, and that's what a lot of people in the Great Resignation realize too, that it's about creating the life that you want to have, with the experiences that you want to have, with the feelings that you want to have on a day-to-day basis, and then figuring out how to fit your work into your life, mm-hmm, and making time to play. Now, why are these three important? When I take people to the Unhustle framework, there's like 7 different areas that I normally see somebody needing to focus their attention on. And the areas are unlearn and relearn. So that's basically the mindset of understanding why we're addicted to productivity. Why do we have this code to business and badge of honor? And what is that doing to us, and where is it coming from? Unthinking, it's basically a way to say, and I was just working on that today for my book, but there's like the times that you find insights in are literally the times that you are taking away time from work. So and it's all science-based. All kinds of studies show that when you show up in a good mood, you're more predispositioned to have more aha moments. when you take time off, when you take time to be alone with your thoughts, when you go for a walk or exercise, and you're spending more time in your body. Basically, we're way into our heads, and we need to spend more time in our bodies. And when you find time for meditation, 10, 15 minutes. So all of these things tell you that incorporating regular breaks throughout your workday is going to be more beneficial to be able to solve complex problems, or you'll have more aha moments, right? Which is what all entrepreneurs need to begin with. Unplugging is another area that, with technology overload, information overload, our brains are scrambled. So taking time away from technology, whether that's a day or a night or an hour, just gives you time to kind of settle down that anxiety and overwhelm that we all experience, and some of it leads to burnout. Unwinding is focusing on your well-being, which, again, all the studies and science show how your mental health, your well-being, your physical, emotional, lead to high performance, right? With Unhustle, a lot of people understand that it's about resting and relaxing, but few people understand that Unhustling puts you in a state of high performance. And so if we're talking about how do we want to do less but achieve more, Unhustle becomes the answer. And unbusying yourself. As entrepreneurs, we spend far too much time chasing shiny objects as opposed to simplifying and focusing on what really matters, right? But you have to take time. You have to actually take time away from your busy day to strategize and say, these are the things I'm going to be focusing on. This is what makes sense, the 80-20 rule, and ignoring everything else. We're just far too obsessed with chasing some kind of shiny object. And the ultimate is unleashing your human potential. And that's my training in Human Potential Institute. It's like, how do you optimize your potential and your performance so that you can realistically be a high performer and live from an optimal state, as opposed to just hustling all the time. So these are like the 7 areas that I coach people on, and I'm happy to go into any one of them.
Yeah, that all really makes sense. And I think maybe just backing up to where you talked about sort of that in reframing the definition of work-life balance. I think, would you say that the general culture, the general thought process is job comes first and everything else gets built in around that? And what you're suggesting is kind of the exact opposite. Build your life and fit your job into that framework that you want to create for your life, right? That's kind of ultimately the idea is getting, not having work be the number one priority, which is hard for a lot of people to do, because you have, aside from centuries of ingrained societal pressure that you need to work to be productive, and first question people ask you is, what do you do for a living? That's a not like how are you
in America, not in any other country. In America, we do. Yeah. And Europe is considered rude. If you just meet somebody on the street and you ask them, what do you do for a living? They look at you like, why are you asking me that? It's such a strange question. We haven't even said hello yet. Yeah. Maybe it's more of an American thing, but it's certainly at least what I see as the norm, right? In a lot of industries, a lot of career paths, it's like, what do I have to do to get ahead? Work more. And it's a hard mentality to break. So when you're coaching people on this, kind of, where do you start with that? What's your kind of beginning step to get someone to kind of shift that? Because that's a big mindset shift. So where do you start? Yeah. And that's when you have that mindset, and it's really easy to fall into that. Let me just say that, right? It's really easy because everybody around you is doing it. Our society has been doing it for years. Everybody on media, well, things are starting to change in media, but we're basically equating your work with self-worth, right? Mm-hmm. And so without your work, you're no one. Your work becomes your identity, and that's why we ask each other, what do you do for a living? I used to be the worst at that. There would be like the number, what's your name? And then the second thing is like, what do you do for a living? Because it gave me a common ground to have a conversation after that, right? I've shifted my mindset around this to try to first understand who the human is, behind the name. And a job or a business is one part of this human, right? But in reality, there's all these other elements of the human behind it. And that's where equating your self-worth with your net worth or equating your self-worth with your work gets us in trouble. Now, I have nothing against making a lot of money. I think it provides you a lifestyle, it gives you the freedom, gives you the experiences you can buy. I think there are all these great things that money affords you to do, right? And I think it's important that we should all strive to be successful, whatever success means to you. We get into trouble when we necessarily think that when you make X amount of money, you're going to be successful, which we know. Can we agree that we know that's not the case?
Yeah, I think that's pretty apparent.
Okay.
Whether you set that number ahead of time or not, there's two components, right? Money's not the only key to success. You can be fabulously rich and have no friends or no relationships and things like that. But also, people set that mark. When I get to X amount of dollars, that'll be enough. But that X keeps moving away, right? You get that, sort of lifestyle creep. So that X moves from you. So yeah, I don't think. I can absolutely agree. That's not some magical number is not the key to success.
Now, what makes people happy? Let's look at the science again, right? Because I don't want to talk just about what I think, but let's look at the science. The longest Harvard study in the world, going on 80 years long, has determined that the number one factor that makes people happy is relationships. Yeah. What's the first thing to go when you're focused on work? It's relationships.
Yeah, sure.
And if we want to talk about health, without health, you don't really have wealth, right? So, and then well-being leads to performance, leads to more creativity. So all these things point to the fact that you need a 360-degree life with rich experiences, which makes you a better entrepreneur, makes you a better employee, makes you more successful at what you do, because your brain, the way your brain works, when you start pulling different ideas from different fields, different ideas from, more aha moments from being outside, more creativity from being in your body, you're going to be more successful and more efficient at what you do without having to work all these long hours. When there was a study that shows that we're only productive 3 to 5 hours a day, right? Because we've changed the way we work. Work longer to get ahead. It goes back to the factory setting when you had to put in X amount of hours and you were getting paid by the hour. We're not there anymore, right? We're using our brains, as knowledge workers, we're using our brains, our creativity, our focus in order to get things done. So it's a different type of environment that we live in. We just haven't wrapped our heads around it. We're still going off on 200 years old outdated norms for working and for considering how to get ahead.
Yeah. I personally think that the time clock work mantra is the worst possible. Like, trying to fill a set amount of time with work is the worst possible way to motivate people to be productive at their jobs. You could possibly, like, what if you told everybody, here's the amount of work that has to be done. When you're done, you go home. But I bet you the days are half as long. There's so much time wasted in the work environment that is productive to no one. So it's like, yeah, you can, if it wasn't on a per hour basis, so often you could really change that. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, but I think with this, a lot of the people working from home now, that's becoming more of a thing. I think people at home, it's like, I get my work done. I'm being productive. My boss is happy. It doesn't matter that I sit at the desk from 8 to 5 and, with my 1 hour lunch break. It's like, you can take little breaks to exercise, take a little break to meditate, whatever it is to help, as you're saying, like, help you have those aha moments and be more, mindful of what you're doing.
Yeah. And think why we're doing this, right? There's fear from a supervisor perspective. There's fear from a personal perspective. And we're measuring productivity based on hours because it's how we've always done it instead of based on output. So there's a management problem there. Look at all the companies and even countries that are going on a 4-day work week. They're all showing better, for lack of a better term, work-life balance, better well-being, less stress, less burnout, more productivity, and working 1 day less. There was just a study that just got published a couple of days ago that you can increase productivity by 70% if you let people do the work they have to do without meetings. We spend far too much time in meetings. We spend far too much time in our inboxes, right? And we spend far too much time doing busy work. I think it's like something like 42% of our days is spent in busy work, not necessarily the work that actually moves our businesses forward. So, but all of these things, in order to figure out what's the work that needs to get done versus what's the work that actually has an impact, this takes time to be strategic and time to think deep and time to do some deep work, not just all that hustle 24/7.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, if you were, so what would you say to, there's a lot of, I don't know, you look at them as mentors, maybe not mentors, not the right word, but high achievers that are well known, like people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. You look in the sports world, you have the Michael Jordans, Kobe Bryant, Tom Brady, like their whole, at least what gets portrayed is their sort of maniacal work ethic, right? And so people see that and they think, okay, well, if that's what it takes to be at the, the very top of whatever, your profession, your industry, your sport is, what would you say to that? What's kind of the I guess saying that that's not the right way to go? What would you say to that, that argument about those high achievers?
I'm not saying it's not the right way to go. So let's start with Elon Musk. Elon Musk we know he's been known to say, if you want to change the world, you need to work more than 40 hours a week, right? He's got, I don't know how many companies. He's, sending people, wants to live on Mars, right. And he's running, billion dollar companies. He also has really big purpose, and his work is his play.
Yep.
Two very big factors in being able to sustain that amount of effort. He's also very well materially rewarded for his efforts. He's also divorced. And has very little time to spend with his kids, but not everybody has that mentality. So bottom line is not everyone has that material motivation or that kind of big purpose to change the world as he does. A lot of people are perfectly happy with having a little bit more intentional, slower life and don't necessarily need to put people on Mars. There's a difference between hustling and mastery, right? I mean, if you want to be good at what you do and you do it for the joy of doing it without that final outcome, then you're pursuing mastery. And I think that's a very big differentiating factor in amount of hours you put into something. You have to practice and you have to put the work in order to achieve that kind of mastery. And I have nothing against that. Again, we get into trouble is when all you do is doing just that one activity, with anything, right? Work addiction can be equated to exercise addiction. Exercise is really good for you, right? We all know exercise is good for you, but too much exercise ends up going against you, right? It's the same thing with work. So when you look at all of these, we call them famous or popular people who have achieved success, right? What I say to people is, first, how do you define success? Is it about fame? Is it about popularity? Is it about money? Is it about having the freedom or the lifestyle or the experiences that you want to have? There was a recent, again, study in the World Economic Forum that talked about the third dimension of how to create a happy life. And it was a different level, a different take on it. Instead of chasing happiness or purpose, the study suggested that creating unique experiences give you a different perspective and keep your life more interesting. So if you want to chase unique experiences, then you're probably not going to be in some kind of a company at 120 hours a week, right? So all of this conversation starts with how do you really find success for yourself? Because it's not a one size fits all for anybody, and everybody's going to have a different version of what success looks like.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think obviously not the majority of people are not going to be Elon Musk, Michael Jordan. That's just not that's not in the cards for most people. But also, I think what you mentioned being, sort of a purpose driven or a passion, people that achieve that level do seem to, it means it's not just a job anymore, right? At that point, it's truly, Elon Musk wants to change the world, right? I don't know that you change the world with athletics, but maybe they change the game. Some of these, high achievers. And so I think it becomes less of a hustle culture if you're just passionate and you're enjoying what you're doing, and likely some of those other components still are going to suffer.
But let's take a look at high performance athletes, mm-hmm. right? They are very well aware that training, in order to go to the next level, yep. It requires time off, it requires rest, it requires recovery, right? Yep. So there's times to push forward, and I'm saying the exact same thing about the way we work. We can do focus sprints, we can push our brains to a certain level. After that, we need time to rest and recover. It's the exact same thing as high performance athletes. We just haven't gotten into the awareness of that, because we think we can keep pushing and keep checking emails and keep checking to-do lists, right. When in reality, we're getting away from what are the most important projects that we need to be working on, which is where we're the most afraid of to go, which is more of a mindset game as opposed to a time game, right? Yeah. So if you look at high performance, they like to spend time in flow. They chase that flow, being in the zone. Right. But a flow cycle has 4 different stages, and rest and recovery is a very important part of the flow cycle. We are all burned out, or most of us, 77% are burned out because of not following that cycle, not taking the time for rest and recovery, dealing with, too much work, unreasonable expectations, lack of communication, lack of clarity in goals, all of these factors that contribute to burnout. So we have it backwards.
Yeah.
We need more time for living.
Yeah. It's a great point. And I think that the rest portion of it is when we talk about these high performance athletes, they're not, what you see in the media is like, look at this workout they're doing. It's amazing. This guy keeps what they don't put in the media usually is, also they sleep 12 hours a night, and they have a chef that has a perfectly designed diet, and they have 2 hours of massage in the training room. Like, they don't, that stuff, that recovery portion of it isn't necessarily as fun to put out there as just watching them, shoot the basketball 1,000 times, or, throw pass after pass after whatever it is, and so it is probably to our fault that we romanticize the side of it that just looks like hustle, right? Like, it's just falling into that culture, and we aren't romanticizing this part of it that, hey, these guys really have to rest and recover to be able to function at this high level. You can't be on 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night every night and still function at your best in each of the games. It wouldn't work. So I think that's a really great point in terms of, from that athlete perspective, that it's not that you're not saying we never push ourselves. You're saying there has to be a completeness to all of it as far as what hustle actually looks like. And
mm-hmm.
what's getting left out of the normal, day-to-day, like normal people, is the rest part of it. Like that recovery, the kind of just taking a step back for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep giving you examples. There was one study done that tracked executives who don't take a vacation versus people who take a vacation. It turned out that people who take a vacation were promoted more than the people who don't take a vacation. So there's very little correlation between. There was another study done by a Stanford professor, basically, that showed productivity. You can, from his perspective, productivity, you can push your brain to about 49 hours a week. After that, productivity starts to decline. After 64 hours a week, it just drops off a cliff, right? So there's a difference between wanting to be busy for busyness sake, or for the fact that busy equals success, which is not true or accurate, because we know a lot of people who are really busy but not successful. And there's a difference between actually doing something meaningful and impactful and putting yourself in a state of high performance and tapping into your full potential, which means being able to manage your emotions, being able to have self-awareness, being able to tap into your creativity more, being able to differentiate your business based on who you are and what your superpowers are, as opposed to trying to compete in the sea of sameness, which was my background in marketing. I've seen way too many people trying to compete on the features, right? Better and faster and stronger. And in reality, that's not gonna move your business forward. You're just gonna compete for forever. And that's a never-ending treadmill.
Yeah. So what would you, I think, I don't know if anyone like Elon or Tom Brady or Michael Jordan listen to this podcast, but I doubt it. But the point being, what would you say, like, for sort of regular entrepreneurial people, or people looking to get ahead in in their jobs? Where would you tell them to start? I mean, what if you're on that sort of treadmill of just work, how do you help them get off? How do you sort of lead them to sort of a better balance?
Yeah, I mean, identifying your values is a really good exercise to do, so that you get a little more aware of who you really are and what brings you joy. What are the things that help you get into that flow? Doing something that is purposeful is also something, like, to your point, knowing your why. Doing something that has purpose behind it. Purpose has been linked to well-being. Purpose has been linked to motivation, to grit. So your passion leads to purpose. Purpose leads to flow. So all these things are really linked. And then taking some time in the morning, my slow is going to be your fast is going to be my slow. So everybody's tempo is going to be different, but everybody needs a little bit of slower time, intentional time. And so I have these Unhustle morning rituals that I tap into on a day-to-day basis, and I mix and match depending on my energy. But bottom line is we have to deal with our mindset. We have to deal with what's going on in our heads. And so things like, I call it the sunrise method. So S stands for sleep, and it also stands for sunrise in the morning. So that's getting sun on your face, and helps you with sleep at night. I know a lot of us struggle with sleep, with anxiety, with overwhelm at night. So that's been a helpful ritual. U stands for unplugged. In the morning, take a little bit of time to identify your priorities and your intentions for the day before you check emails and calendars, because other people's agendas are going to become yours. And stands for a little bit of time in nature, combining a little bit of mindfulness practice and gratitude, again, science-based practices to put you in a better mood, which leads to better aha moments and more calm, more focused throughout the day. R stands for reading and writing, for people who are into the creative area, things like journaling or could be a mindfulness practice, or just reading and writing something, not the news, to just get inspired, put you in a better mood. I stands for setting your intentions, and I try to do no more than 3 a day. We're like worst estimators of how much time things take, and we leave our most important project till the end of the day. So moving this around to the beginning of the day has been really game-changing for me. And then S stands for a little bit of stillness. So that's your meditation, or maybe you're drinking your coffee, take 5 minutes, just a way to kind of check in with yourself, with your body, with like what do you need for that day from an energy perspective. And E stands for energy. So if you're doing a bulletproof coffee or cold shower, some movement practice in the morning to kind of get your mind and body moving. When you do all of these things, you feel a lot more aligned, you feel a lot more energized, you feel a lot more focused. And then with the clarity of what really needs to get done, you can overcome procrastination and stalling and delaying things. So it's really simple practices that we've gone away from because of our hectic lifestyles, right? We have the tendency in our phones and technology and everything, but it's really going back to being human and checking in with yourself and saying, it's the journey, right? It's not the outcome at the end of the day. And you end up being successful because of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So in reality, it comes down to mindset, habits, actions, results, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that, sunrise mentality. And I think, ultimately it comes down to if you want to get off that treadmill, right? It's self-awareness and intentionality of, okay, this is what I want. This is what I want out of life. And then putting steps into place to make those things happen, really. And having, starting your day that way will really help you get started. You mentioned that just having your three intentional things you're going to do that day and putting the most important one of the day. A lot of people say, I'm not a morning person, but I think, well, you're not a morning person if you don't let yourself be a morning person. Like if you start your morning this way, then you can, be productive and kind of get the hard stuff done. And then the rest of your day, looks a lot brighter from there. If you don't have that, really daunting task kind of looming to the end of the day.
Well, let's talk about the morning person too, because I'm definitely not a 5 a.m. morning club person either. I think working with your biology instead of against it is very important, especially as entrepreneurs, especially people working from home. And what I mean by that is knowing your chronotype. So not everybody's going to be a morning person, but do you know what a chronotype is? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So knowing your chronotype, the free test you can take online to determine your chronotype, but you could be a night owl, right? And you could be most creative at midnight. So just use that to advantage instead of trying to fit into some mode of having to work from 9 to 6, right? I'm a bear based on the chronotype quiz that I took, and so I know that I'm kind of about 50% of people fall into that spectrum. And so when you do your creative work, when you do your respond to emails and stuff, it's going to be, so creative work would be like mid-morning, 11-ish. I used to do a workout, like an hour-long workout at 6 a.m. in the morning and be completely depleted, for the rest of the day. So I've turned this around, and now I just work on my book in the morning, leave my workouts for later in the day. So there's just a difference of how you about how you know your body and how you work with your energy that leads to higher focus, higher performance. So we all know we have to eat well and exercise, but how many of us do it, right? So it then comes down to consistency. The intention is there, but the consistency of how often you do it leads to the better actions and the better results. And that's kind of how you create new habits. I don't know if you've read James Clear, Atomic Habits.
Just finished that like 2 weeks ago. I love that book.
I mean, the one thing I walked away from him with that is that you need to change your identity to change your habits. So if we keep telling ourselves that we're in the hustle mindset and you have to hustle all the time in order to be creative, in order to be successful, that's going to lead you down that path of having to do more all the time. And doing is one part of the cycle. We also need time to think, time to rest, time to create. So when we change our identity and our definition of success around that, we can actually start to change our habits. Knowing the science and the research behind and understanding that it's actually beneficial to your brain, to your productivity, to creativity has been helpful to me anyway to rephrase that it's not just about doing nothing, because that was really hard for me as an overachiever, type A top performer. I was like, I can't just sit around and do nothing. Still struggle with it till this day, right? Knowing that it's actually beneficial helps me shift my mindset around it.
Yeah. It is. I struggle with sitting still. That's not my.
Yeah, we all do, because we've just raised that way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's, but I think, what you're saying is, and that, that sort of, I think when I'm saying morning person, I guess I'm not saying it necessarily matters the time of day that is. I'm not saying everybody needs to get up at 5 a.m. or whatever. I like what you said. The way you sort of phrase that is that you have to figure out in that day, what do you do at those certain times? Like instead of just saying in the morning, I do nothing because I'm not a morning person, maybe in the morning, that's when you're journaling or you're right, doing your meditation or whatever it is that actually energizes you for the day, and figuring that out rather than just saying, I don't do anything for the first, segment of my day because I'm not that person. I think, there's lots of people that are more productive, more energized in the evening. And that's great. I think it's knowing how that works for you. And as you mentioned, not trying to squeeze a specific work hours into, or squeeze yourself into those specific work hour structure. As we said before, instead of leading with work, lead with your life, and then bring work into that in a way that makes sense for you. I think it's great sort of outlook and way to function.
Yeah, if you think about what most entrepreneurs struggle with is stepping into the unknown. Mm-hmm. For the most part. I love to see what you have a podcast on mindset, right? So from my experience of working with people, it's low self-esteem, it's lack of same as lack of confidence. Fear, right, is a big one. What are you seeing when you talk to people?
Well, the funny thing about that is I have a podcast that has a lot on mindset, because I was very afraid of starting a podcast, like being on camera, just people listening to my voice. It's still, I don't listen or watch the podcast myself. It still kind of stresses me out, even, in these Zoom things. I'm like, I look over, I'm like, there I am. But so it was something that it was something that for me was extremely uncomfortable. And I believe in, sort of pushing myself into uncomfortable situations if I feel like it's something I can be passionate about, because I love the conversations, right? Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be scary for me to sit down and talk to you about this stuff, like off a camera, that kind of thing. I love it. But yeah, I think, a lot of the mindset stuff that ends up sort of being a reoccurring theme is getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think, there is a lot of, sort of that hustle culture mixed into all of this. I think it's hard to get away from it. I think what you're saying is 100% true, in that there's got to be some balance to life. And so it can't be that way all the time.
Balance is fine, but let me just address this one point, because you just hit it on the head. We don't want to go into where we're uncomfortable. So we would rather busy ourselves with other things, which make us feel good, that we're productive, which makes us work longer hours, and it's this vicious cycle. And so we feel good about being busy and checking off the to-do list, but in reality, we're not addressing the one thing that either will take us to the next level, will grow our business, will make us uncomfortable, we'll get more investors in, all the things that in reality would help us grow the business are the ones that put us in an uncomfortable state. So how do you deal with the uncomfortable state? Is by being in your body, by scanning your body, by recognizing where it is, by sitting with the emotion, by understanding what the emotion is telling you, by falling in love with the fear, and by understanding that fear is normal and it's there to tell you something. And for some reason, we've been, trained that we need to overcome fear. We need to, bypass fear. And in reality, it's there for a reason, right? It's just another emotion. But we try to bypass it by staying busy. So if you go into the direction of the uncomfortable from a position of presence and a growth mindset, then you're going to grow your business a lot faster.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's that's a really much more eloquent way to put it than I ever have been able to describe. I think it's just you have to be present. You have to be able to kind of make that decision that, okay, the fear is there, but it's probably telling me something. Using it to your advantage, I guess is probably what I'm trying to say. But yeah.
And there's very little difference between fear and excitement in how it shows up in the body, just to take it a step further for people, because it was very interesting for me to realize that fear and excitement show up in your body the exact same way. So you can trick your brain into thinking that fear is actually excitement. So for example, with your podcast, you said, there was fear about starting them, but maybe it was excitement that you're going to do something that's completely different than you. Or you can reframe it that way and trick your brain into thinking you're excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point. And I think they mix, right? Because I was excited about starting it. I am like, I'm still excited. We're nearly 100 episodes in, and I'm like, I still love this. I think it's these conversations, especially stuff like this, that it's just like, this is the way to help. This will help other entrepreneurs, sort of be more productive by taking out the busy work. You said it's easy to fill up space, getting things done, checking things off the list, and feeling like you're accomplishing something. But what in fact you're doing is avoiding the big things that you really need to do. And so I think that's a really great point that I know I do it. I know it's like, oh, I should do this thing, but look, I have 50 emails that are left unanswered. And it's like, I would be better off probably just deleting all 50 emails and sitting down and doing, some big thing to push the business forward. So I think it's a thing to always keep in your mind. Am I really being productive, or am I just being busy?
But let's go a little bit deeper into why we do this from a what's happening in our brains, right? So it's the short dopamine hits that we get by checking off an email or responding to a person that is waiting for you to respond to an email because it's somebody from your tribe and you don't want to left them waiting. So there's a lot of actual going back to thousands of years ago as to why we do what we do, with answering emails and responding to people all the time. And the big hard projects are long dopamine hits. So for example, me working on a book, the fact that I wrote, 2,000 words today means nothing. I don't have any likes, comments, shares, that you get from social media unless I go ahead and share some of this, right? And so from that perspective, understanding what's going on in your brain, knowing that long-term dopamine hits versus short-term dopamine hits from the neuroscience perspective, you're going to lean normally. The tendency will be to go into the short-term dopamine hits. So that's time on social media, time in your inbox, talking to people, all these things that at the end of the day, are they really adding that much value to your business, or are you just being busy?
100% agree. I 100%. And it is very easy to just be busy because it does give you,
because there's always going to be work.
Right. There's always something to do, right? It's not, this is not to suggest that anyone's making up stuff to do necessarily. It's just that you're maybe not prioritizing where the big impact items are, and you're like, well, I can check off all these emails, I can whatever it is, learn
some new skill. I mean, how many courses have you signed up for, and how many times have you gone down somebody else's content instead of producing your own content, right? I mean, that's I see that a big tendency with entrepreneurs. So we're constantly like, oh, well, somebody's selling me a course and that's guaranteed to help me do X. And so you end up learning something new, not necessarily implementing it, instead of doing what you want to do, right? So if you're constantly consuming content, yeah, that's busy. Yeah, you're learning, but is it helping your business forward or not?
Right. Yeah. Consuming other people's content doesn't create anything for you. So it's just, for sure, it's a very easy cycle to get into. And so I love this sort of bringing this to light, because I think I do it. I think a lot of people do it. It's very simple to get caught up in the busy work, rather than intentionally saying, this is how my day is going to go to get me ahead. Maybe at the end you check the emails, whatever it is, you just kind of make it work for you. So no, I think that's great.
Or finding the time to be creative, so you can differentiate your business based on what makes you, what makes you unique, what's authentic about you that you want to put forward. Instead, we compare ourselves to other people, right? Oh, so-and-so has such a course, I need to do the same. Instead of trying to create something, set up yourself as a category designer in your category and eliminate the competition, we end up constantly comparing ourselves in that fear of missing out, right? And so turning that into the joy of missing out and spending more time thinking of how to be different versus how to compete on some kind of features is going to be also beneficial to your business.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Finding the way to stand out is absolutely a much better way than trying to just fit in with what everybody else is doing, because then you'll get lost in that shuffle. So I love that. I love that a lot. I really could talk about this for forever. I don't want to keep you all night. Let's shift gears and go to the part of the podcast where I get to ask you a few questions. I'm sure you'll have some more very insightful answers, but let's make sure we get that in, so I don't keep you talking forever. But first question is related to the name of the show, the name of the podcast being Know Your Why. So Milena, what is your why? What drives you towards this level of success?
Well, this is how I started, actually. This is how Unhustle was born, was with my why, right? It was actually... I went out for a hike in the woods, and I was thinking, what is my biggest problem? What is my biggest problem? It's this whole notion of hustling. And so 3 months later, the name Unhustle was born, but it came down to my why. So my why is to revolutionize how we live, work, and play, and inspire millions around the world to live more intentional life and still do the work that matters to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's so needed. So, I mean, it's so needed to have that, someone to get people off the treadmill. I think it'd be fantastic. I look forward to your book. Maybe tell us something about yourself that isn't common knowledge, special skill, a hobby, whatever, something to let people know you a little bit better.
I used to be a ski racer as a kid. Married to an Australian. The dog is Mexican.
A family of world travelers.
Yeah.
Perfect. When people hear this and they would like to reach out, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, it's real simple. Unhustle.com. I have a free ebook they can download to see how 7 people and companies have adopted this Unhustle mindset and are thriving instead of just surviving. And they can get that at unhustle.com/ebook. And everything on social media is at Unhustle. So you can tag me and tell me what was your biggest takeaway from this show. Tag both of us and tell us what you loved or didn't like about the show. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, me too. That's actually a great idea. Final question, and you've given us so much good advice, but what advice would you give to people that are, I guess, stuck on that treadmill of work and sort of they want to make a change? What would you tell them?
Yeah, take more time to be present throughout the day. It could be just a 60-second. There's a brain coherence. You can establish heart brain coherence in 60 seconds. So whenever you feel overwhelmed, stressed out, anxious, don't know which way to go, just take 60 seconds to do some deep breathing, and you'll be able to get your nervous system a little bit calmer, and that would help. So 60 seconds, that's all it takes. It doesn't take, hours.
that could be huge in a lot of situations. So that's awesome advice. Well, listen, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think people get a lot of value about this, and I imagine you'll be getting a lot of people checking out your website and looking forward to your book. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, we will sign out. I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.